the former inner Christian quarrels about doctrine into a different light. We Christians started asking ourselves whether we had no other things to say and show to the world. Are we, the followers of Christ, King of Peace, only another group of infighters? Do we not have, in the good news that God is the Father of all, a great message urgently needed today? Can we, as the one church that overcomes old discord, not become a light of hope, an example of reconciliation for other conflicts? Suddenly we Christians felt that we had lost time and energy in condemning the belief of a fellow Christian, rather than seeing in it an enriching experience, an enriching perspective of our common faith. Our fellow human beings' cries for help made us understand that we Christians can actually work together and grow into what we were meant to be from the beginning, as one great faith community. The leaven, enzyme, catalyst of humanity's unification. Already some decades before World War II, some Christians had tried to uncover an old idea that, however, had not found much resonance among Catholic leaders first: the coming together, the growing together of the long-separated Christian communities. The project's name reawakened a Greek term of the early Christian self-understanding. The term translates all humanity, oikumene. That is the origin of the words ecumenical and ecumenism, intra-religious dialogue. In the face of the 20th century's horrors, Christians had finally rediscovered that they have greater challenges than keeping their profile clear of their fellow Christians. Our responsibility in a world in which many resort to the quick solution must be a testimony of patient work for unity rather than an emotional condemnation of the other. Therefore, my third thesis: the sense of unity grows within a religion if it feels how its origins call it to responsibility in today's world. Responsibility also means that the believers have to respond to the questions and needs of the people around us. We are losing time and credibility. We are losing lives if we focus on how wrong the other is and how right I am. Precision in faith questions is important, but it also requires precision in understanding what Christians from other traditions are really saying. If we can speak again as believers who understand each other, we can be responsible. We can speak with one voice and respond to the questions, desires, and needs of our young. Only then we can transmit our faith's meaningful message to them. When I look at young clergy in today's Europe, and then at the now old priests, I presently see less enthusiasm for dialogue with others. For some incoming European church leaders, the most important concern seems to be our own side. Why is that so? Well, for one, the memories of the war are fading, and people forget what we were able to learn from it. But there is another reason today many Christians see their identity in danger. That is the identity trap. Because the many options of modern life seem to challenge us to clarify our identity. Now, the quick answer becomes attractive. A magic formula, the safe way to your safe profile. A short definition. The problem is that a real identity lives without a self-definition. It requires patience and sensibility because one cannot put it in words. Identity needs to be experienced. How can we experience it? First, in a life of reading and learning, discussion and reflection, we sense our tradition's growth in history and its place in history. And I sense that my own story and future are shaped from many sources, religious and cultural ones. In other words, I can experience my identity in an ever-continued education. That also leads me to a second source. We can experience our identity in prayer life, when we sense that God has a call for us, a future for us. Thus, out of joyful gratitude, our hearts will be shaped. And from there, in our active life, by serving God and our fellow creatures, and now sense the confirmation. Yes, that is our call from God. That is who we are really meant to be. Texts, signs, vestments, rituals, prohibitions, all those can help, can be helps in living my particular identity. But those exterior markers must not come from my individual decision and must not lead to my self-distinction over against other believers whom I want to consider as less pious than myself. We cannot use such markers as if they were an identity technology, a tool against the culture we reject. Rather, we can only receive such traditions and thus enter into the mutual process of transformation. We are being transformed by our religious culture, and thus we will also develop it further. It is tempting to let our identity be designed by modern standards of visibility, performance, and success. If I let my identity symbols be dictated by someone's simple formula, what I will have is yet another brand on the global market, a religion like Nike or Apple, rather than a living tradition. Believers will not be attracted by simplistic offers of self-definition and self-demarcation if they come to sense their identity in learning, praying, and serving. When a Protestant in Germany becomes a Catholic, some of my fellow Catholics comment, finally he understood where the only true church is. That is actually not the attitude of Jesus. If we have the sense of Christ, we know that our faith community is not yet what it is meant to be. Acknowledging that my own faith community is not yet perfect opens me to acknowledging the other. Many have heard of the great worldwide renewal process with its events and texts of 1963 to 65, the Second Vatican Council known as Vatican II. until Vatican II, we Catholics said that the only ecumenism is the ecumenism of return. In other words, there is no other way to church unity. The others have to come back to us. Now we know this is wrong. Ecumenism, finding together, is not looking back, but forward. None of us was perfect in the past. None of us is perfect now. But in this process of coming ever more together, we can all heal. That is also why the reunification of separate communities from the same religion is not a compromise. It is rather becoming more completely what we are meant to be, in richness, tolerance, and the joy of growing integration. Joy. Also about the other. That brings us to the next thesis. The opening of the Reformation's commemorations happened in Lund, in Sweden. It came as a big surprise that there was a special Catholic guest. Pope Francis was there. On that occasion, he said something remarkable. Actually, he did not simply say it, he prayed it. O Holy Spirit, help us rejoice in the gifts that have come to the Church through the Reformation. We can see the individual religious other as a gift. We can see this other tradition of our own faith as a gift. And we can even see that God's wisdom has brought good things out of that, what we felt for centuries to be only the source of disunity. The other is a gift we can rejoice in. The person who lives a competing tradition, but also that other community, that other style of living our faith. The new interest in the Bible, hymns in people's own languages, a good preaching, well-educated clergy, and even the humility we all gained in seeing that we ourselves cannot bring about our intra-religious unity. All those effects of the Reformation are gifts which we can now cherish as signs of God's generosity, God's way of purifying us, God's challenging us, God's gifting us. Beyond this joyful tone, however, more is to be learned from the demanding inspiration of the present Pope Francis. In 2014, the Pope traveled to Jerusalem and met the Grand Mufti Muhammad Ahmad Hussein there in the Holy City. He also said something remarkable. To sense its challenge, you have to imagine that everything expressed on that occasion was to be heard also on the background of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Francis called out, "Let us learn to understand the pain of the other." That must be my seventh message. We must learn to understand the pain of the other too. In the Holy Land, the two conflicting parties cannot tell their history together. They will both say, "We are the victims of humanity's most inhumane suffering. The whole world is siding with our enemy. We want peace, but the others frustrate every attempt to live together. Because of their unreliability, a serious dialogue is impossible." Both will say all this, and both have good reasons. Any advancement is blocked, any solution is deadlocked. In this context, and to all of us, Francis gives this risky direction, dare to sense what the other has gone through. good can come out of that? You will be a greater human being. You will not be blinded by small-minded jealousy, as if the other was so privileged and you were the real loser. You will be open to new ideas, to constructive proposals, to a new vision of what real life is. It is, first of all, not that the other has to disappear. The other will be around. And yes, that is not easy. Now, so far, my thesis sounded like the proposal of a mediator who comes from outside. They sounded pragmatic, and as if the faith contents of the religious traditions played no role in solving the conflict. But I am a theologian, and I do think that the teaching of my faith tradition, my religious community, is true. Therefore, I will also show you the method Protestants and Catholics use when they write documents of agreement in the hard questions of foundational teaching. In an agreement, the concern of the other must be expressed. If we want to reach unity, our best experts, our greatest faith teachers, must come together too. That is what has been happening between Catholics and Protestants. These Christian specialists produce texts. They are documents of outstanding quality. That is so because they follow an excellent methodology. It is called differentiated consensus. It does not mean they formulate a compromise. In our most existential themes, we do not want compromise. To avoid this, the method of differentiated consensus was developed. It proceeds in 3 steps. First, both parties say how they can express a central faith question in wording that is acceptable for both. After all, we both belong to the same religion, so that must be possible. But that is not enough. Then each party expresses why they have a different tradition in speaking about this question, why they set different accents, utter different preoccupations, underline the importance of their profile. They write down their particular concerns. Finally, after listening to the other's concerns and listing them in the document, both parties again write together, declaring that those concerns do not cancel the common formula found at the beginning. A dialogue that follows this rule will often take different rounds until the right expression is found for the common faith formula. Once found, however, it is a solid basis for the future. It is so strong for 3 reasons. It understands that unity is not uniformity. That our faith has always had room for variance, cultural difference, for a certain plurality. And that we can distinguish between essential belief and contrasting perspectives on it. Is there a lifestyle in which a lasting coexistence can grow? My formula is the following. Living together in mutual understanding flourishes when we have moments of face-to-face, of side-by-side, and of back-to-back. We need to sit together, to talk about our past, to hear the pain of the other, to listen to the other's differing understanding and practice, to go through the story of our separation, to allow the memory heal us, and to rejoice in the gift of the other. That is the face-to-face. Apart from that, we also need other moments of togetherness. We need to work in a common project. First of all, as faith communities, this is of course shaping this world together in the way that is inspired by our common faith, especially passing our faith on to the youth. Also, charity work is a great ground for such coming together. But sometimes the task must be much simpler. This dimension also comes in when we speak together to outsiders, or the society, to the world. It is good to have one voice then. Finally, it is an all-changing experience when we can stand as one united community before our Lord, when we can pray together. With the face-to-face and the side-by-side experience always in our hearts, we can thirdly have times of back-to-back. There will be things we do not do together. We may have different liturgies or different teaching sessions. It is a sign of trust that we allow the others to have their spaces for themselves. In Turkish, the one standing back to back with me is arkadaş. That is the word for friend. You trust your friend back there, although you do not see him, but together you have the full circle perspective. The Second Vatican Council showed why Christians should be in favor of freedom in questions of religion. This is not a lack of conviction of our faith. Quite to the contrary. Freedom of religion is rather religious freedom. It follows from our faith. We promote a state that leaves its citizens free to choose their religious beliefs, or not to believe, or not to choose. Why does that follow from our faith? Faith is a willing, loving yes to God. And as such, it requires the space of freedom in which such a truly loving yes can be given. So far, I have spoken out of Christian experience. Indeed, as a Christian theologian, as a person grateful for having found many Muslim friends, I might also give some hints at Islam's own traditions of Muslim understanding and unity in diversity. I mention very quickly 9 points leading to the last, my 10th thesis. First, the Quran's fundamental intention is to call everyone to conversion to the one and only God. So, the Quran speaks to free persons, free to take their own life decisions. Second, the Quran's vision of the Muslims is for them to be the middle community and thus God's shuhada ala nas, witnesses to all human beings. The Quran is, however, well aware of the dangers of disunity. Its way of dealing with quarrels in faith questions is to remind the dissenters of their common ground. In the Quran itself, that refers to Jews and Christians. But the principle holds for inner Islamic quarreling as well. Agree on what is your common ground, but do not strive for uniformity. Fourth, inner Islamic dissent in questions of belief was, from early on, mixed with struggles for political power. Every generation has to uncover the politics behind doctrine. An old Islamic motto says that salvation is in the community, jama'ah. That word can be a good orientation because it might mean not only in the group over against the individual or in the big group rather than in some sect, but also that the way to paradise is to go in harmony. Sixth, what the early rulers normally avoided was to declare dissenting Muslims to be unbelievers. They did not want to get obliged to start a religious war against them. Seventh, the classical Sunni rule to have 4 different legal schools, madhahib, active in the same place, is a model for visible unity in diversity. Eighth, today we remember the due respect the 2004 Amman message and its concrete 3 points of the following year found on the side of both Muslims and non-Muslims. Something like an ecumenical Islamic declaration. Finally, the Marrakesh Declaration of 2016 had many Muslim groups speak with one voice, jointly commemorating an event, here celebrating 1,400 years since the Charter of Medina, and accepting the concept of citizenship as basis for each person's rights. Consequently, my 10th and final thesis must be: the Muslim Ummah is meant as a testimony for all humanity. Islam's foundation, tradition, and presence has its own resources for intra-religious harmony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Felix. At this point, I now encourage our fellow discussants in the inner circle to weigh in on the discussion. But before that, may I ask everyone, before you begin sharing your thoughts and ideas, to, as it is a conversation, it's not a forum, it's not a lecture, to say, hello, brother, hello, sister, my name is, I am from what your organization is or your religious denomination. I am happy to be here. And then you may share your thoughts or your reactions to Father Felix's 10 theses. Would anyone like to begin? Or shall I call out one by one? It's a conversation. We're supposed to spontaneously exchange ideas. Yes. You may use the face icon, press it so that you can talk. Thank you.
Hello, Father. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum. Peace be with you. I am Sheikh Saleh Musa, Al-Kalam Sharia Advisory Board, and a member of the National Ulama Conference of the Philippines and the legal assistant of Bangsamoro Transition Commission currently. I am very appreciating your lecture now regarding the how to achieve unity and how to achieve reconciliation, because I know that the Global Council now, they created a group of peace committee, globally, regionally, and locally. But the question now, why they can return back to the religious topic, always politically topic, their issue. Then we know that all prophets in the world, they are commanded by the God to worship or to pet, traditional pet. Then they commanded by the God to observe their respect to the other and justice and loving. That is why I commented always this group, why go away from the religious topic that in my personal thinking, this is the best way to achieve peace in this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh Saleh Musa. Any reactions, comments, thoughts? Yes?
Hello. Hello. Yes. Hello. Hi, brothers. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. I am Marifa Agar and I am representing the Moropreneur. It is a social entrepreneur organization based in Cotabato City. Okay, I am first of all thanking Father Felix for a very enlightening lecture. And actually, your first thesis caught my attention, the healing of memory, because it very much resonates with the Bangsamoro context. As you may know, Mindanao, particularly the Bangsamoro areas, these are conflict-affected areas in Mindanao, has experienced a protracted armed conflict. And we are also in a process of healing from the almost 4 decades of armed conflict and historical injustices committed against the Bangsamoro. And I would like to borrow your words. We will only get lasting peace if we dare to look at what happened, what was done, by whom, not in order to cut new wounds, but in order to allow the old ones to deal. You see, there is this concept that gained traction, and I think it's very much applicable also in the Bangsamoro. We call the concept is called transitional justice and reconciliation. And I think looking at the healing of memory concept, these two are similar. There's this concept also dealing with the past, yes, and it is very similar also with the healing of memory. I'm not sure if healing of memory involves judicial measures to redress past historical injustices. So, therefore, my question comes in. In the healing of memory, does it involve both judicial and non-judicial measures as a sort of redress for past human rights violations and historical injustices committed against a group of people? And my second comment or remark is on your 8th thesis, the differentiated consensus. And I agree, we really need our religious leaders to come together to bring into the table the problems, the challenges that are being faced by our faith, Islam. I'm not an Islamic scholar. I am not also an expert of the Islamic doctrine and the laws of Islam. But as a Muslim, I feel the need to participate in dialogues and discourses such as this, to voice my not maybe solutions, but I think what can be done to make sure that our religion, Intra, lives not necessarily, as you said earlier, unity is not uniformity, but unity in multiplicity. So that's what we want to achieve as of now, that we want to reflect that there is indeed unity in diversity in Islam, and it is actually one of the basic tenets of our religion.
Thank you, Ms. Marifa Agar. Yes, Mr.
Yes,
Jafar Kimpa.
Mr. Jafar Kimpa of Jabu Jabu, the Calling Incorporated, at the same time chair of the Zamboanga Amores Interfaith Incorporated from Zamboanga City. Sister, no, if you look at that consensus, I think leaders, Muslim leaders, should go back to what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was advising us. If there are differences, go to what is stated in the Holy Quran and what is the hadith of Rasulullah. Then you are going to discuss that and solve the differences from that principles. We are already having guidance from the religion on that. Now, as Father Joel was telling us, there's no monopoly of truth, or there is no monopoly of knowledge. So, it will be unsafe for us to judge a person or an act of an individual because we don't have the totality of the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are very limited. Maybe recognize or respect whatever is the act, and then look after. Maybe he is wrong and you're right, or maybe you're right and he is wrong. That's what the Prophet Muhammad was saying. Either I'm right, you are wrong, or you are right and I'm wrong. Now, about the Muslim Ummah, it's really a community that is guided accordingly. For as long as we internalize what is being taught to us in our religion, everything has been perfected there, so we need to internalize those things. And I also support the saying of Brother Sheikh Musa. Most of the problems that we have here are politically motivated. When you talk about Islam, there's no problem, because Rasulullah has been telling us you are divided into 73 groups, so you should be aware if that fellow is having different practice, so you should be aware he is one of the 73 that is supposed to be his follower. So these things are already there, intact. But if our leaders are using the religion for their political agenda, that is where we are having a problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kimpa. Let me traffic the conversation for a while. In the order, Dr. Panda, and then Dr. Limba, and then Attorney Dalumimbang, and Brother Carl.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much, Father Felix, for the very comprehensive discussion on the various theses you are going to look for a very significant reactions or discussions. I observed that in your presentation, you're actually explaining the problems behind or affecting unity, despite that all human beings believe to have one God. And I also believe that all religions have process towards unity, peace, and development. To Islam, there is a need for us to return back to the Islamic education that was being observed by the Prophet and the Sahaba. Because we believe that Islamic education as a process towards peace, unity, and development. Because it molds the value of taqwa in order to have considerable number of muttaqin in a given society. There are two aspects of education. We have the revealed and the acquired knowledge. The revealed knowledge referring to the words of God as enshrined in the glorious Quran and the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. And the acquired knowledge refers to the knowledge that is learned directly from the various creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the very purpose of such is to mold, I said to mold the value of taqwa in order to have considerable number of muttaqin or a God-fearing people, just like what the Christians should. Because every religion must mold a persons who have strong belief in Allah, believe in God, rather. Now, once we have the considerable number of muttaqin or God-fearing people, whether you are Christians or Muslims, you are responsible to institute and develop towards peaceful coexistence among people in a given society. That should be the main thrust of the people, that we need to ensure peaceful coexistence, just like what happened during the lifetime of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, that when he reached in Medina, from Makkah, he was able to establish the Islamic community in Medina, where diverse people were there. There were Jews, Christians, Muslims in Medina, and Prophet Muhammad used to have covenant, the first ever constitution made in the world before the international law, before any man-made laws. That covenant actually bind the people of Medina, both Muslims and non-Muslims, and the very purpose is to defend Medina from outside forces. That is the showdown of having a peaceful coexistence, as it was demonstrated by Prophet Muhammad and the Sahaba. I believe this is what we need now in different sectors of the world. Both Muslims and non-Muslims should have to work, because in the glorious Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakari wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. In the English translation, Allah says, O mankind, we created you from a single pair, men and women, and made you into nations and tribes for you to understand one another. To some extent, for you to cooperate one another. But the most honorable among you in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those who are God-fearing. The God-fearing people. So therefore, The very purpose of having this nation and tribes in this world is to understand one another. Because no country, no person or a country or a society can live alone without the help of another. No one is not an island. So therefore, since everybody needs another, every country needs another, we need to unite as one. We have to be united as one, whether you are Christians or Muslims, because we believe in one religion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Panda.
Let me greet all of you, including the awake, the sleepy, and the sleeping ones, with the greetings of peace. Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am your brother, Mansour Limba of Al-Qalam Institute of Ateneo de Davao University. Let me concentrate my reaction on the last thesis. And I label it takrib, not takfir, the way to rediscover. In every faith tradition, in the early period, the doctrines and practices were simple. And the original guide or guides were present. And in later period, the doctrines and practices became complicated with the coming of new circumstances, followers, and questions. And the original guide or guides, they were no longer present. So the early period usually was considered the ideal period, and the later period usually considered the period of challenges or challenge because of the differences and conflicts. The Quran has many citations on both periods. Indeed, this community of yours is one community, and I am your Lord, so worship me. Inna hadihi ummatukum ummatan wahida, wa ana rabbukum fa'budun. The faithful are indeed brothers. Innamal mu'minuna ikhwa. Hold fast all together to Allah's cord, and do not be divided, and do not be like those who were divided into sects and started discourse. And many other verses. In this discussion, maybe you have no qualms in agreeing that a key term here is unity. And we need a conceptual clarification. What we mean by unity. Otherwise, we will become like the four blind men. They all declared that they know elephant, where in fact they just knew parts of the elephant. One possible conception on unity is what we call homogenization. Okay, let us unite all the madahib in Islam. So what is an outcome? The outcome is takfir, meaning to declare other Muslims as kafir, and not only as kafir, but even as murtadin. Murtadin means apostates. And this laboratory of experience is now in the Middle East, as we can see. It's burning. The second conception on unity is heterogeneity. Okay, each of you have your own madhab, and all of these madhab are 100% correct. I believe that such kind of conception on unity borders on nifaq or hypocrisy. And the third type of unity is what we call takrib, or proximity. In this proximity, all madhab should be respected, and all the common grounds should be looked upon and discussed. And all the madahib in Islam, the schools of thought in Islam, the scholars would agree that most are commonalities rather than differences. And what are some of the efforts toward this proximity or takrib? One good case is the case of, I describe as al-muraja'at, or the correspondence. The case 1 is a series, a very long case of correspondence between Sunni alim and Shia alim. The Sunni, I am referring to Sheikh Salim Bisri, the Mufti or Rector of Al-Azhar University, and the other one is Sayyid Abdul Hussein Sharafuddin Al-Musawi of Lebanon. The correspondence, there were no emails during that time, the snail pace. It took not months but years. After that, they were able to compile the correspondence into one book, and that book is Al-Muraja'at, which is accessible online. The second case is something that I would describe Darut Takrib. Darut Takrib is a subsequent correspondence and discussions between two giants in the Muslim world during that time. I am referring to Sheikh Mahmoud Shaltut, the Mufti or Rector of Al-Azhar University in Egypt, and Sayyid Hossein Burujurdi, the Marji' Taqlid, based in Iran during that time. And what was the outcome of these fruitful discussions? Two outcomes. One outcome is the issuance of the historic fatwa by Sheikh Mahmoud Shaltut that to follow the Ja'fari madhab is just following any other madhab. The second one is the creation of an office called Darut Taqrib Bain al-Madhahib al-Islamiyya, that is World Forum for Proximity of Islamic Schools of Thought. And the case 3 is the Amman message, which was mentioned, fortunately, by Father Felix. I would not dwell on this because my time is up. Let me just wrap up by saying that as a small step in this way forward, we can endorse the Amman message online. It will just take us 1 minute. They will just require your name, your email, position, and then the endorsement that you have. If you have no 1 minute, then you can have 10 seconds to like their official Facebook page and to share it. To like and to share is just saying yes to takrib and no to takfir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Limba. Dr. Limba gives us the best example of how to introduce ourselves in a conversation. I hope others will follow suit. So in the order that I mentioned a while ago, Attorney Dalumimbang and Brother Carl.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. I am James Dalumimbang, Sharia by profession, representing the Sharia Lawyer Leagues of the Philippines from Cotabato City. I am very much thankful to our lecturer and to all speakers a while ago. So what I'm going to speak is about the unity, this unity of the Ummah. Because when I read several books, I discovered that even the Sahaba, that they were this united, and that this unity transcended to us. So if we have to scan the history after the demise of Prophet Muhammad, that there were 3 questions arose where the companions of Prophet Muhammad disunited. This is a question of history, and please take note. One question is the question of interpretation of the Holy Quran. Then the second question is the question of imamate. Then the third question, the question of successorship. So we have to find the answer of this. Because when Prophet Muhammad died immediately, then the companions of Sahaba disunited. but the Holy Quran is a living witness. Because some of Sahaba believe that Prophet Muhammad, even the majority of our ulama, the learned people of our community, believe that Prophet Muhammad did not leave a will. Did not leave a will. But if you try to find in the Surah to Maida, if I'm not mistaken, Surah to Maida, verse 68, and do not interpret according to interpretation. Because if you have to, and you are not a Mufassirun, you cannot get the correct answer. That is now the problem, because we are going to interpret the Holy Quran, even that you are not a Mufassirun. So if you want to know the interpretation of the Holy Quran, we have to follow the interpretation of the Mufassirun. Because we have the two contents of the Holy Quran, we have the clear and unclear. So that unclear, we need the interpretation of the Mufassirun. So that's why that even today, the disunity of the Muslim Ummah is prevailing. I will give you a set of examples. We have 56 Muslim countries. Then out of 56 Muslim countries, only 6 who are not celebrating the Maulid al-Nabi. The 50 Muslim countries are celebrating. The question is, are the ulamas of the 6 more learned than the 50 Muslim countries ulama in the world? So we have to consider that. So I agree with that, with Dr. Panda, our former professor at Mindanao State University, that we need in Islamic education. Because if we do not have a Islamic education, we cannot constitute a God-fearing people, because they do not know. Considering the fact that only the Holy Quran distinguishes the bad and the good. You have to read many books that you cannot find distinguishes bad and good except the Holy Quran. So thank you and very much.
Thank you, Attorney Dalumimbang. Brother Carl?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamualaikum. Maayong hapon sa tanan. I am Brother Carl Gaspar. I am a Redemptorist brother from Davao City. I am the Dean of the St. Alphonsus Theological and Mission Institute, a partner of the Ateneo de Davao, and I'm also here at this university to teach anthropology. I would like to share 3 points from 3 perspectives, namely history, anthropology, and theology. But first of all, thank you very much, Father Felix, for being with us. Certainly been a privilege to listen to you in 2 occasions, both from the perspective of interfaith and now intrafaith. I would like to suggest to Father Joel Tabora to keep you here, short of kidnapping you, so we can run a semester's course. And I guarantee you many of us will enroll. So much to learn from you. First, like Ms. Marifa Agar, the first thesis. Historically, the Philippines, especially Mindanao, has so many memories to be healed in relation to Christian-Muslim relationship, which goes all the way back to the beginnings of the Asian trade, to the Spanish colonization, to the Marcos regime, and even as we're sitting here now because of Marawi siege. The healing of memories is very difficult in our context. We struggle through it and continue to find ways by which we can process this healing. I began my own healing process 40 years ago when I got to know Bishop Tutud in Marawi, when he began the interfaith movement here in Mindanao. And he used this expression way back because he really said, until we are able to enter into the process of healing of our memories because of all the pains that we have gone through. We cannot even imagine that we're able to take the first step towards peace building, and then what was then the more privileged perspective of interfaith dialogue. Because even in our country today, the teaching of history does not allow for it. That's why there's been some initiative here in Mindanao, and there are very interesting and very worthwhile beginnings, led by CAAP, for example, to try to push further for the teaching of a history to all our children, Moro, Lumad, Muslim, Christian, private schools, public schools, so that we have a shared understanding of this history in the hope that we can learn to enter into a process of healing. But not easy, but there are steps, hopeful steps being taken. Secondly, your thesis in relationship to identity, a very important discourse for us in anthropology. True enough, the markers are out there. Unfortunately, the Marawi siege, the rise of the ISIS in our midst, I think is pushing us back in terms of our efforts in the area of interfaith dialogue. Among us Christians, the challenge of intrafaith has already been recognized, and we have tried our best to respond to it, from our theological institutes to our base ecclesial communities. I've been engaged in BEC work in the last 50 years, and I tell you, it is also difficult. At the height of the 2008 collapse of the peace talks, we were in Sultan Kudarat, in the parishes within the Archdiocese of Cotabato, where there is a history of Christians arming themselves. And because of that collapse, and there were already signs again of outbreaks of war, we knew as we visited Christian homes, mainly Ilonggo, who is also my ethno-linguistic origin, my father being Ilonggo, were rearming themselves, bringing back the memories of the black shirt and the barracuda during the pre-martial law that led to the outbreak of martial law. And it was so difficult to have sessions there among our basic ecclesial communities of some of these Ilaga members, because they were just so convinced for purposes of defending themselves. And we knew even within our own Christian tradition, the whole aspect of interfaith, let alone dealing with Protestants, especially those that are of the fundamentalist type, like the Iglesia ni Cristo, the Kibuloy. They're only talking about even within the mainstream Protestant groups and within the Roman Catholic Church. That has not been difficult. A very good story that will illustrate this point. There was this young priest from Malaybalay where Islam is not so present, unlike other parts of Mindanao, whose discernment of his vocation led him to decide to be engaged in interfaith dialogue and ask his bishop to free him from this diocese to transfer to the prelature of Marawi, where substantially the great majority are Muslims. And he passed by the Archdiocese of Cotabato because he has former classmates there in the seminary, and proudly said, I'm moving to that prelature because I want to engage in interfaith dialogue. To which his classmates said, have you lost your mind? Why go there when you are so safe in your mother diocese? So these were priests themselves who did not encourage him to move into that area. And you're right, today there has been a lessening interest of both interfaith and interfaith dialogue. But true enough, these identity markers are really arising because Christians in these troubled areas, especially where you have media in the Philippines demonizing Muslims because of ISIS are creating spaces of legitimization for taking on a very aggressive anti-Muslim sentiment, difficult terrain to operate in. Which brings us lastly to the field of theology, what we can do. I'm very glad Bishop Balies is here, our Archbishop, because he's the incoming CBCP president. And the recent statement of the Catholic Bishops' Conference during their last assembly in the wake of the Marawi crisis once more underlined the importance of interfaith dialogue in the Philippines, to which also should be added interfaith, because among ourselves, there's so much to be done in what you said, that we should learn together, pray together, and serve together. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Carl. Before we proceed in asking the insights from our fellow discussants, can we just hear your thoughts on what was already said? The questions that were raised also by Ms. Agar, I believe it was not answered. Father Felix?
These are extremely helpful, profound, inspiring remarks, and also questions that will help us to see more precisely what a common future can be. I would like to enter into some themes briefly. Sheikh Saleh had that important question, but why on earth do religions who have a religious intention become political? We have to see that religions are not only about prayer. Religions also want to inspire human beings to shape the world, to show everybody what real human being and human life is, and therefore looking for a form, a society which corresponds to those religious inspirations is normal for religions. So the formula, religion is a private matter, is not correct. But we need to retain a very clear distinction between the type of power a religion can and may have, and the state authorities can and may have. The word that sociologists have developed in the last decades is, in a society, in the world, there can also be very powerful so-called soft powers who do not have the access to arms. That we want. So thank you for that important question and the occasion to clarify, yes, we want to shape the world, but not like a state politician, but because we inspire human beings, shape the conscience, educate hearts, and make people listeners. Mrs. Ma'arifa, does the healing of memory mean that we have extrajudicial measures? Very clearly the answer is no. Then we create other forms of disorder and injustice. But the soft power of religions, which is very powerful, which is very inspiring, which can speak out very loudly and clearly, can also say what our tribunals, courts, judges, politicians legislate so far is not real justice. So they can express that and therefore create new processes of rethinking of the constitutional structure. But no parallel states, we have enough of that. That is dangerous and does not create a world of a solid basis building on truth and justice. Thank you also, Dr. Jafar, for reminding us of the hadith of the 73 ways, which then came up again. Let me only add one important aspect here. The hadith in its formula and in its meaning is disputed. What is behind it most probably is not 72 are wrong and one is correct. And I was very happy to hear that from two mouths this afternoon, that there is a sense of plurality in that early tradition. It is not by chance that the number is 72 and 1. Of course, everybody will find his own way, school, movement to be the true and correct one. But the others are 72, and 72 is a good number. Think of the other many things we have with 72. It's the beauty of cosmos, the order of creation. There is a will of God also behind this. An advice and invitation for the very profound inspirations we hear from Muslims in a context where also Christian listeners are present. You use very rightly your own terminology, but Christians often do not know the Arabic words. When you, Dr. Ali, spoke of taqwa, once you also said it, it means fear of God. Fear of God does not mean, neither in Islam, nor in Christianity, nor in, according to the Hebrew Bible, in Judaism, I am blocked because God is evil. No, not that kind of fear. It is acknowledging that God is greater than all my thoughts and formula and truth claims. Muslims, when they write a scholarly article, often finish with a beautiful formula. I have all the arguments put out now, but Wallahu alam. God knows it better than me. You could translate that. Yeah? That is quite rightly mentioned by you. This humility that is in the fear of God. Thank you for that. Dr. Mansour, I very much agree with your points and proposals, and I suggest one other way of translating takrib. And I think I'm going along your own direction, because I think it doesn't only mean proximity in the sense of we are already close. It is a dynamism, an action, an effort, even a risk. It means coming closer, approaching, in a way, rapprochement. Isn't that what you also mean? Yeah, a way, a path. Very wisely you said these dialogues between Shia and Sunni leaders took place on high level with good results before the time of email. Were you not also saying between the lines, sometimes it is good when things take its time? Is it not often necessary to think of my next answer and not to shoot back the next email or Twitter tweet in 20 seconds? Attorney Dalumimbang, very correctly, you said the big discussion has always been about imamate, who is the legal, legitimate successor to Muhammad as imam, a leader of the community, and about interpretation. Now I want to say something which has come up several times in this first round of discussions. Yes, we have the clarity of the Quran and the clarifications of the Hadith. But when you really read the Quran and when you really study the words, you see you have many different opinions even about the meaning of the Quranic text. That is not a problem. And it is right that you say, let's return to listening to the Quran. But it means also opening up a space in which well-argued, well-informed, profoundly studied opinions in their difference can live together. Yeah? Sometimes I hear in theological faculties in Rome, among the Catholics, even among the Jesuits, and I hear the same thing about Muslim theological faculties, for example, in Turkey. Ah, how sad that we have those disputes and disunities in our faculty. No, it is good that in the same faculty, accepting the Catholicity or Islamicity of the other, we have discussion. And sometimes that becomes a bit heated. But that brings us deeper, challenges us, and gives us new food for good arguments. If only none of the participants excludes his fellow believers from the community of belief. Yeah? So, in a way, let's enjoy also the frictions of dispute. It brings our quality to a higher level. There were so many very good remarks you all made, but it would even in a way water them down if I made comments on everything. Let me simply stop here and say I'm deeply impressed by the profound quality of your contributions, and I'm looking forward to the next round. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Felix. There are still others here in the inner circle who wish to say their piece. So Mr. Lunar Failoga, and then Mr. Hussein and Mr. Ali, in that order. And may I see your acrylic, sir? Mr. Buaya. Okay.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. I'm Lunar Failoga, representing the Theology Department of Ateneo de Davao University. I have only a few points. First, I'd like to appreciate not just the content of your presentation, Father Felix, but your stance the moment you spoke to us. You have that right attitude for intra-religious, because you begin, first you claim that you're an outsider, and because sometimes we're allergic to know-it-all speakers, or imperialistic, I appreciate that. Having that attitude of humility. And I'm very happy that you, and at first I expect that you would be talking about Islamic thing, but you started with our own Christian history. And it's not always glorious. You started with divisions, the pains of the Reformations. And I think that kind of attitude would help the other. Personally, me, as I listen to you, it allows me to open up easily and to listen to you. What if a German and a theologian from the Greek like you and a Jesuit talk as if you're the speaker of God? I think your stance would affect me. But personally, I like the way you said things, and you tell us your own story, the German history. And I hope that even among us Christians and among us Catholics, and we know that even in the Vatican, in the Roman Curia, the struggle is real. Why? Because people would like to begin that I am right, and Francis is wrong, or probably Francis is wrong, are right, and you are wrong. Thank you. I think that's very, very important. Second point, this is my concern about when we begin to talk about unity, but I'm very grateful that my good friend Dr. Limba talked about, made some nuances in religious, however it's unity, etc. But I'm very my good friend Dr. Limba, because sometimes our desire for unity may cover up those marginalized voices. And I think we need to confront realities. Did you know we're talking here because we're open with one another and probably we're level-headed? But the challenge comes into the picture when we have not invited those who do not have the same mindset with us. And that brings us to the third point. If there is a presence of ISIS or religious extremism or radicalism, in the church there is also what we call fundamentalist Catholics, no? That we believe that we are the only right. Even in our archdiocese, how sad that the Catholic faith defenders have not really grown up, that they keep on defending where in fact it's no longer the trend. It has its value, and yet outside the Catholic Church, there is no, there's already a pronouncement and you can analyze that. But I think we need to address that. This radicalism, and that's one question that I'd like to address to you, Father, na if given the chance, how would you, and also to my good friend Dr. Limba, how do we deal with those persons who really do not have the same mindset, the same perspective? If we're only the ones talking, there will really be unity. No? But if I will bring, we haven't invited an ISIS father, no? I'm just seriously joking, but serious. When we talk about marginal voices, women in the church, women in Islam, homosexuals in the Catholic Church, homosexuals in Islam, children, and the likes, including ISIS or radically minded persons in Islam. How I wish that I would be able to encounter one ISIS. But please, just encounter. Huh? Not that encounter, no. But to be able to, I'd like to enter. We can talk in behalf of them. But how I wish I'd like to meet one ISIS in my life, and I'd like to listen. Where is he coming from? And I like your presentation because you talk about pain. You talk about our difficulty. I like your presentation because I thought it will be another romanticized discussion of intra and inter. Thank you for bringing us to the difficult, it's really painful. That's one. And probably the last point, I will end there, no? I have several points here. I will end there. I'd like to address to our fellow young listeners here, fellow youth like me, the use of social media. The social media is being used for propaganda, good or bad. But I hope for my fellow youngsters here, I hope we use our social media not just about becoming a fame whore, but also use social media to advance our desire for peace, and not only our desire for peace, but to make us more aware that the desire for peace and unity is really a difficult process. It can be very a bumpy ride. So I hope that this conversation will not just stop here, that will lead us to the very forefront of that desire to dialogue where radicalism, I don't know, a radical mind, no, emanates. And that is one major question that I'd like to hear from Dr. Limba and you, Father. How do we deal with them? If suppose there's an ISIS here, we'll be talking, how would we react to them? So, thank you, Madayaw Davao.
Thank you. May I request those with active microphones, but they've already finished talking, to turn off the face icon to allow the others to be able to speak. I believe it is Mr. Hussain's turn next, and then Mr. Ali, and then Mr. Buaya, and Dr. Clamor.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuhu. Maganda, mapayapa, masagana at makakalikasang araw po sa ating lahat. Maybe baka ato ko po yung inanap ni Sir. Joke lang. Okay po, just to lang po ang lahat. Pero we can be, pero just light lang. Okay po. So, one of the distinguishing characteristic of our modern society is its pluralistic nature. No society in the world today, whether traditional or technologically advanced, is homogeneous. Everywhere we find social groups made up of people of different backgrounds in terms of language, culture, ethnic origin, socioeconomic class, race, and religion. So in the case of Christian and Islam, one of the frequent cause of tension between the two faiths arises from the fact that both Islam and Christianity are dawahur, or missionary-oriented religions. Both believe that they have a divine call to invite others to join their respective faiths. This right and duty is not to be denied. Yet, in their eagerness to spread their faiths and bring others to the knowledge and worship of God, they should attempt to exercise their mission or dawah in ways that respect the freedom and dignity of persons and maintain harmony between the communities. Despite of these differences, I agree, sir, on the statement that Christian and Islam can live together and also work together. Christians and Muslims or Islam comprises nearly half of the world's population. The nature of relationship between these two communities is of considerable significance for the welfare of the whole human family. Significantly, peace is at the heart of Christianity and Islam. Christians call Jesus the Prince of Peace. Their prayers for God's peace is at the heart of their spirituality. In Islam, As-Salam is one of the 99 beautiful names of God. When Muslims meet, they greet each other with Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. In the face of the deadly threats that today confront both humanity and the earth itself, there is an important contribution which these two faith communities can make. There are enormous possibilities for the collaboration between these communities to work together for social and racial justice, for the defense of human rights and people's rights, for the safeguarding and promoting religious freedom, for solving conflicts peacefully, for addressing the plight of refugees and displaced people. So that's all my reaction, sir, on your very profound what do you call this, statement a while ago. So that's all. Assalamu alaikum and mabuhay po tayong lahat. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. Hussain. Mr. Ali, your turn.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good afternoon. To certify our presence here, let me read a verse from Quran. In chapter 5 or Surah Ma'idah, verse 82, it states, "Certainly you will find the most violent of people in enmity for those who believe to be the Jews and those who are polytheists. And you will certainly find the nearest in friendship to be those who say, we are Christians. This is because there are priests and monks among them and because they do not behave proudly." Thank you very much that this event is started, and we hope that our fellow Muslims, to the help of other non-Muslims, this can be pursued and hopefully successful in the future. The very problem in our community is that when they have a dialogue, they do not use microphone as a means of communication. Instead, they use guns as a means of understanding. This is unfortunate, but a reality. Despite the forgiveness, how many stated in the Quran, to forgive not only your fellow Muslim, but as well as non-Muslims. The unity several times emphasized in the Muslim faith, despite of which the disunity exists. Maybe we have to look its reason why. And I found, you are free to agree and disagree, some other factor that ignites our disunity is the increasing number of mosques prayed during Jum'ah or prayed during Friday prayer, because it develops further disunity among Muslims. Ideally, to me, you are also free to agree and disagree. Ideally, one town must be one mosque or one prayer room, so that there could be a converge among the community, among the Muslim community. But presently, there are several mosques. The only boundary is just highway or street, and the other community are praying in another mosque, while another community is praying in another mosque. And it really develops not a unity, but the reverse of which is the disunity. Thank you very much for having this. If only I could move that this assembly have to be organized formally, so that it could be a council or what we call this, whatever we call this, to act as a mediator in whatever conflict may arise in the future, whether it is in a Muslim community or in a Christian community, so that it could mediate, it could be an umpire to them. Siyempre, formally organized. Whenever there arises a dispute in the community, we cannot easily call somebody to judge among us. And the very problem is whenever there is a quarreling arise, one faith accuse another faith by saying that we are right and they are wrong, and the reference is his own faith. Maybe the correct one is you have to judge your fellow Muslim or Christian according to their claim faith. But the matter is you judge according to your belief, which is wrong. Another one is I have to leave a question here. Maybe a million Muslim, I am the only one thinking this or wondering why. Every now and then, especially the Muslims, they claim that the Quran is complete, that Prophet Muhammad, the last prophet, is a complete. he perfected the attitude, the character. Whereas in a barangay transition of leadership, for instance, or president or barangay mayor, governor, before they step down of barangay captain, there is a determined people to succeed the stepping down barangay captain. Whereas Islam is a universe, and yet the Prophet of Islam failed to give a guidance to the people that after him, we all agree that after him there is no prophet because he is the seal of the prophet. But after him there must be a leader who can interpret correctly the Quran, the Islam, and whom the people can consult whenever there is a problem. But the prophet failed to do so, or I fail to know that he appointed somebody, and until now I do not discover. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Mr. Buaya, yes.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. I'm Archie Buaya, an indigenous people from Maguindanao, who is representing the Confederated Descendants of Raja Mamadu. First, I would like to thanks for the invitation, and of course, the presentation is really scholarly, Islamic, on the Islamic perspective, it's very scholarly, so maybe I cannot really understand those texts because even that I am an indigenous people as Islamized, but the differences between the Shia thing and the Sunni thing, for me, it's really hard to understand. I believe that as an indigenous people, we're a peace-loving people. Before the arrival of Islamization in the 12th century in the Philippines, in the context of the Philippines, and the arrival of Christianity in the 15th century, people, the native inhabitant of this nation, of this community, are living together. This identity, for example, they are really united. So when we trying to find the situation at this time, there's a lot of things arising. The extremism thing, the radicalism that caused violent extremism to the ground. It's because of the differences and different understanding, and maybe the interpretation of the holy book, the Quran in general, and of course the Bible. So I would like to react on the four theses, especially on the identity. For example, as an indigenous people in Mindanao, people from outside, they dictating our identity as Lumad. But this term Lumad is the Visayan term from Visayas, of course, from the Cebu people. And the Moro people dictating their identity as Moro because of the Spaniards referring them as belong to the Moors. The Moro are the Moors, since that Spain was conquered by the Moroccan for more than 700 years. This identity until this time among the indigenous people, for example, is still confused for them. In the case of indigenous people within the Bangsamoro area, at this time, even that they are already participating in the peace process or even in the crafting of this certain law of the Bangsamoro, they're still confused of that identity. And this identity leading them to divide themselves. Because in my tribe, in the case of my tribe, we are 120 plus thousand population. But not all of them are Muslims, and not all of them are Muslim, and most of them are Christians. The context of minority within the minority among these indigenous people in the particular tribes, again, they are experiencing different form of marginalization, discrimination, and all that. But the question is, if we wanted to eliminate this kind and all forms of discrimination and marginalization, how to come up with a unified identity among these native inhabitants as calling to be, for example, including them as belong to the identity of a certain group. Since that among themselves, as a single tribe, they already confused of their own identity. Who they are, who I am I belong to them? Are they really accepting me of who I am? Those questions arising. Of course, in this room, I believe that everybody understand the level of our communication or maybe the level of our discussion. But when you go down to the ground, talking to the grassroots members of this specific tribe, they cannot understand us. You're going there, then discussing all this extremism, violent radicalism. I don't think if they easy for them to understand. So, who are those people vulnerable on the possible wrong explanation on a possible recruitment to be recruited of something like radicals? Those people who really lack of understanding in terms of those line of thinking, like what's happening right now. So I believe when we talk about identity, we must be sure that this identity should first we need to know our history, the basic history. For example, the Maguindanaon group of people, they believe that they are descendants of Tabunaway. But when you ask them, who are the Tabunaways? Who are the Mamalo descendants? I believe even them, they don't know that. So, if we really wanted to know our identity, our responsibility, we must know our basic history of who we are and where we came from. We're always claiming, for example, we are Muslims. Being a Muslim, who are the Muslims? You people are scholars in terms of explaining the Islamic way of life. The Shiating professor, my friend, my colleague in the IM, Dr. Limba, and the rest of the professors, they keep on telling that the difference of different school of thought in Islam. But the basic question of who are the Muslim? Who are we? Are the Muslims or those people claiming Muslim, for example, in Maguindanao, but they are still practicing the haramic activity? Are this group of tribe? For example, this tribe are claiming Muslim, but then their activity is not the activity of Muslim as being way of life? So we must consider that this kind of context, when we defining the identity, we need to consider those things, and especially the history of being who we are. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Archie Buaya. And finally, Dr. Clamor, before I turn it over to Father Felix.
Magandang hapon sa inyo lahat. I am Arnie Clamor, Theology Professor in Ateneo de Davao University. Maraming salamat for inviting me to this conversation. When you speak of fullness ahead, I already have a glimpse of the future, and I cannot help but dream of a time when Christian scholars would be invited in a Muslim university to have their conversation with a Muslim professor, expert in Christianity, to be moderator. I cannot help but think of this kind of future. And then we would listen to each other, express our questions, pose our questions, empathize with our struggles, and suffer our own pains. I cannot help but think also that in Rome, the center of Christianity, there is a mosque. Because even I beg your indulgence if I speak from a Christian perspective, the center is also a space for religious freedom. And but of course, speaking as a Christian, the real center is Jesus Christ. But when I look at, I am a theology professor, and I try to educate our students in the faith. We look at the history of the church and see many mistakes, which had been tragic for certain peoples and vulnerable groups. The Crusades, the heresies that claimed that only the predestined, the pure, could achieve salvation, the colonization, which justified the elimination of certain indigenous cultures. There was a point in our history when we believed the cross could go hand in hand with the sword, and we have learned painfully that this is a falsehood. In other words, we have learned painfully that we cannot work for peace with instruments of war, that we cannot save the human person by destroying a part of him, not his body, not his freedom. I'd like to propose a further thesis for reflection. And, well, we speak of the healing of memory, and in my study, in my teaching, I realize that we also have to clarify, indeed heal, our image of God. Because I'm teaching the social doctrines of the church this semester, and I've always been telling my students that when we work for justice, we do not say, this is the truth, we have to work for justice, but the energy that motivates our working for justice must not mimic the very violence and injustice we are trying to change. In other words, well, we speak of identity and clinging to our doctrines, but sometimes they are we work on them too strongly. We insist too strongly that when we absolutize them, they could turn into a false religion and lay waste the world. And that is a real danger. In particular, and in my classes, I try to, well, get from my students, what is your image of God? Because the image of God, I believe, colors the way we conceive of everything else, especially the way towards unity, the way towards justice, the way towards peace. Because if we conceive of God as a just God, but a little bit violent, however redemptive this violence may be, we inevitably we see that the working for unity and faith becomes also, would lie also in violence. In other words, we will tend to see that we can bring about the unity of the world under one faith through the roads of violence. But the thing is, God is not a force of redemptive violence. How do I explain this in contemporary terms? God is not a Marvel superhero. I would like to address the students now. Remember in the showdown of the god Ares and Wonder Woman, when Ares told, why do you want to save the world? You know, men, they are so evil, etc., greedy. They will just destroy the world. And Wonder Woman said, yes, they are evil and all of that, but they are much more. And spontaneously, she talked of her experiences of love and goodness and self-sacrifice. And she said something to this effect, I fight to be able to save that. And I think this is a common ground. We fight to be able to save what is deepest and noblest in our humanity. Because we see in my study, in my prayer, in my active life, I realize God is not a God who overpowers. God's power in the world, according to my faith tradition, is never a power of brute force or brilliance or muscle, a power that blows you away. I'm sorry for the image. The word's power never works in this way, but the power of the God I have known is more humble, more helpless, more vulnerable, more marginalized. And In our religion, we say this is the power of the cross. And it's a very paradoxical power because it's only through passing through the cross that the Spirit is engendered in those who believe in Jesus. Because this lies at a deeper level, not juridical power, not military power, but it's power that lies at the core of our conscience, at the power that lies at the heart of our humanity. And ultimately, I believe in the end, this will have the last say. My religious tradition believes that God cares for all the victims, regardless of religion, and that He suffers with us, that He stands in the midst of our brokenness, and that when we stand there with Him, we bear the pain of others, we are open to we listen to them and bear their pain. I am being faithful to the gospel. Thank you for this occasion to share my deepest convictions. That to believe means to be able to worship God in freedom and truth. And I'm very happy for this occasion to be able to listen to you. Although the powers that be will tell us, oh, this conversation will not bring about any change, it will not solve the problems of the world. But, well, for me, it's my way of lighting my little candle in the dark while waiting for the light. Marami pong salamat.
Thank you, Dr. Clamor. Father Felix, there are still other people here who would wish to weigh in on the discussion. So before we hear from Father Felix, maybe a few words from Attorney Ambolodto. And then Mr. Barlizo, if you may, and Mr. Ontong, before we open up the discussion to, and Mr. Espino of the Saman Central Board, before we open the discussion to the rest of our participants. And Father Felix, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon and assalamualaikum to everybody, and especially to our guest, Father Felix. Actually, it is just my humble understanding of your 10 theses you have just presented. For me, sir, just forgive me the way how I understand your thesis here. You have 10 theses here, and the way I understand is, it is just, you have just interpreted the verse of the Holy Quran as my former mentor here emphasized a while ago. When our Lord, the Lord of the Muslim and the Christian and the other religion, call upon us, not just the Muslim and the Christians, but He called the mankind. And I would like to reiterate here. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O mankind, we have created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes, that you may know each other, and not that you may despise each other. The most honor of you in the eyes of God is he who is most God-fearing. Because your 10 theses, the 10 theses you have given to us here always speak of reconciliation, unity, knowing each other. The very basic two verbs used by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is knowing each other. Can I give an example of the importance of knowing each other here? In a very simple situation, a man and a woman. A man cannot fully love a woman if without knowing that particular woman. In like manner, that woman cannot fully love that man if she do not know that man. In a larger way, a community cannot love the other community if they do not know in the full extent of that, the nature, the behavior of that community. They could not love them, those community, if without knowing those, fully knowing the many things about that particular community. Just the case in the community of a Christian and the community of a Muslim, if they do not know each other, fully understand, then they could not love each other. That's all. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Attorney Ambolodto. Mr. Barlizo.
Thank you, Ma'am, for giving me a chance. Before I
I would like to greet you in our noble and traditional greet. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Leonardo Barliso, came from municipality of Bucebed Santos, and as a president of Bangsa Sangir tribe. I am very thankful to giving me a chance for to attend this intra-religious dialogue. So even it is very difficult for us to come here because of the distance, but we are trying. Thank you very much, Father Felix. In my part, regarding the said event, I would like also give my only healing memory, because during the fast since the administration of President Marcos, and until now, I cannot forget what happened in our place, because especially in our tribe, we are belong to the cultural minorities. I think very difficult for us to regarding the situation of our place. You know, there are many what's happened during the time of that administration, and until now I cannot forget to remember, because the dislocation of our place and regarding the, especially in our community, in our tribe. So that's why during the fast, if we will not make regarding the reconciliation between different tribe in our place, I think we cannot go back in our place. So the important is reconciliation regarding the different tribe, especially what happened in our place in Mindanao. You know, what I have observed regarding the crisis was happening in our in Marawi, that is the political motivation. So I think it was happen if we cannot make any solution regarding this, because it was spread in our different places in Mindanao. So that's why I hope we are here now to join this intra-religious dialogue, to make also to find a solution how to give and to support our national government to solve the said problem. So I hope what I learned and observation regarding this, the peace advocate is very important also, and dialogue between the different, make dialogue the different religions, like Muslim and non-Muslim, and the Christian, and especially the Lomad. I think we know what happened if we cannot make this this problem, because during the time time of President Marcos, I was also one of the make a negotiation between the Moro National Liberation Front and the government. So that's why during this status of our in Mindanao, I think if we cannot make a solution to find the different religion and different sector of our community. So we cannot, even in our situation, because as of now, what I have looked in our situation, I think the crisis of Marawi, if we cannot control it, it will be spread in different places in Mindanao. So the most important, I think, that we will make regarding this solution, regarding reconciliation, because it was stated in our event, yes, this, and I think in my part, as one of the leader, especially in my group, I would like to emphasize, especially in the young generation, to educate more, giving education, so that they will not go to, I think, you know it already, while Brother Carl was also talking about the said problem. I know he have a big, what do you call it, interest to reconcile, especially in our place during the time, because he's good to the municipality of Ciudad Santos, especially in Barangay Nuing, to during that time to convince the Muslim Sangir leader in that place to have unity, it's especially in the Christian community. So that's why I support him interest, because, you know, to not to create what do you call it, regarding the Christian and Muslim misunderstanding. So that's why I also very thankful for your interest, Brother Carl, to giving me the said attention regarding the said reconciliation. So in this part, I am only supporting the intra-religious dialogue of this event, even though I know that in my part it is very difficult, but I try my best to support these activities. I think, thank you very much, and that's all. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Barliso. I am reminded by our organizers that we're supposed to have a health break. With your permission, Mr. Ontong and Mr. Espino, can we resume with your insights after we have a short health break, if that is okay, to allow our other participants to go to the bathroom if they need to go to the bathroom. Some might wish to offer prayers. I'm told there is a prepared prayer room in the ante area of this Finster Auditorium. And if you need to do other things, we resume in 15 minutes, if that is okay, to allow for other fruitful discussions from our participants outside of this circle. Thank you very much.
daig sa fried chicken. Ito ang best tasting. Pinipilit tunayan, pero di ba pantayan? The best sa crispy-licious, juicy-licious, gravy-licious. The joy of the nation. Best tasting Jollibee Chicken Joy.
Your favorite sisig rice bowl is now on the go. Hot shots, chicken.
my email address. If you want.
Good afternoon. Our session shall resume in 1 minute. If you can all take your seats. Thank you. Can we now take our respective seats so we can resume our Pakighinabi? Father, are you ready to begin? To continue. Okay. We shall now hear from Mr. Jariski Ontong of the Mindanao Indigenous Peoples Initiative for Research and Assistance Center. And after Mr. Ontong, we shall hear from Mr. Espino before I turn over the microphone to Father Felix and we expand the discussion to our participants outside of this inner circle.
I see. Hello. Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala jami'an wa barakatuh on the part of my brother Muslim. So, first of all, thank you very much for the Ateneo de Davao University for inviting me as one of the reactor to the presentation of Father Felix to this intra-faith dialogue. So this is my first time to participate of the intra-faith dialogue. So I really appreciate with the presentation of Father Felix because this is very useful in our community and it can be replicated to the community-based the presentation. Because while we are talking here about the intra-faith dialogue regarding what is happening now in our environment, in our global and region, but of course we somehow neglected what was happening in our community. So it should be, while we are talking and pushing this unity and dialogue in the higher up, we must also set a venue to dialogue in our community leader so that they will also aware what is happening now in our global, what is happening now in our society. And so with that, I hope through this effort, it can be replicated to our community. What we have learned here can be also replicated to the community level. Because if we are just talking here in this very cold room, but what will happen to our community? So it should be, the community should learn what we have discussed here. Like what happened in the peace process, well, our peace panel talking about matters affecting of our community, but in the community level themselves, they did not talking to each other what is right for them. And it should be, the community should be involved. Not only involving by consulting them, but also involving them through crafting of program, laws, and etc. And consulting them what is the right and appropriate solution to the problem in the community. Because they themselves in the community know very much what is the solution to their problem. Because they are in that community. And therefore, they are very much aware the solution to their problem. And we only supporting to them if that is also in compliance with our laws, both divine law as well as our constitution. If that is legal, based on our faith, based in our divine laws, and also our constitution, why not supporting them? So I would like to challenge this body to somehow create or from the participant or reactors to undertake with their capacity
to talk to each other of the different faiths and religion, no, in our community, because we know each other and we can have a better understanding to each other if we in the community, the religious leader, the tribal leaders, the academic, and all sectors in our community should get involved in order to preserve the peace and better understanding among each other. So I think for now, I am very much thankful to the Ateneo de Davao University for convening of all these bodies in order to solicit their views and outlooks with regards to the present situation, as well as providing us Father Felix to give some insights regarding the intra-faith dialogue. So thank you.
Thank you, Ustad Joriski Ontong. Let's hear from the youth, Mr. John Kevin Espino of the Samahan Central Board.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm John Espino. I'm from the Student Council of the College Unit of the Ateneo de Davao from Samahan Central Board. So I know we're discussing about inter-religious dialogue, but I could not help but reflect and think about how significant the thesis were also in the context of us millennials, especially in application outside of our faiths. So millennials, it's the hot word nowadays, and everybody seems to look into us and up to us on what we are going to do. As the adage says, children are the hope of the future. So there is a very big weight placed on our shoulders. So with these discussions, as Father Felix have said earlier, religion is not just about prayer, but also an ideal to which we all aspire to have in our society as well. So there are 4 points regarding the thesis. I'll start with the healing memory, then the identity, and the concept of the other, and the 8th and 9th, which I've just renamed into time and collaborative roles, more or less. So for the first thesis, healing memory, pardon me if I may sound insensitive, but when we are asked about issues, especially on things that are concerning our country nowadays, if you think about it, these issues are even older than us. For example, the historical injustice to our Muslim brothers and sisters in the context of Mindanao and the bad things that happened during the Marcos regime. These are things that have happened outside of our direct experience and knowledge, but somehow our parents, our relatives, our fellow countrymen have experienced this before, and this is something that was beautifully laid out in your second thesis, first to third thesis, that talking about even if we're not there physically, even if we're not there as us experiencing it, we still have the responsibility, especially towards reconciliation, especially towards correcting the wrongs that were done, and especially in healing and acknowledging the pain and the suffering that happened during those times. So in light of our current issues, especially now that we are experiencing, for example, the recent death of Kian de los Santos, this is also something that we are still healing and yet experiencing at the same time. So it's a challenge. And more importantly, when it comes to identity, we are because of the prevalence of internet and social media, we are the visual generation. And to some extent, what we seem to be is more important than who we really are. Our engagement, our identity sometimes is defined by how many likes we get, how many shares and retweets we have online, and how perhaps inflammatory our posts may be, because that gets more retweets and likes, and in turn. And somehow this is very, parang how do I say this? Very signs of evidence as to how we interpret and how we look for our identity. As was said in the presentation earlier, our identity is developed through a long process and through a long span of time. And somehow right now, we are the instant generation. And the temptation to adopt identities is even more powerful, especially in the context of online. In conversations with some of our students, especially with our Muslim students, there has been a reflection that perhaps some students join ISIS because they see a sense of identity and belongingness with that kind of ideology. And somehow, that is a very controversial thing to think about, especially in our context here in the university, because as they've said, and we can't verify this, there are members here. There are those who subscribe to those ideals. And it's rooted from a sense of, we don't know, we want to establish our identity, but at the same time, we can't take the time to establish our identity. So that's for the identity na thesis. For the concept of the other. So I think with our discussions, especially those that we carry out online, we always seem to prioritize having something to say and not really reflecting or not even thinking about whether or not what we are going to say would add to anything, or it would just add to the conflict and miscommunication that's happening online. So, more importantly, I sometimes feel that we just want to be correct. And we want to just tell that other people are wrong. There is no place for accepting that we may be wrong. And the primary thesis about the other is openness to accepting that we may not be correct, even if we feel we are, is as important, so that we would acknowledge that perhaps we are also wrong. So that's for too much focus on what is right and wrong, and not much focus on the actual meat of the discussions that we are carrying out online. And this is evident not just with us millennials, but also with the reportage that we get from our news outlets sometimes. At the end of the day, when you read an article, you just think about what is this article trying to say? Is this trying to add to the conversation? Or is this just trying to say that we are right? Or this is something that you should know because this is the truth. But there is also a question, is the truth interpreted in such a way that it would lead to better communication and more nation building? As a question that has often materialized in our discussions, is there no more place for nuance? Is it always going to be one stand, a definite stand, but no place for more critical thinking and more comprehensive discussions? And then there is also this phenomenon of, this is just my opinion. We are not so afraid to say what our opinions are, but we cannot take responsibility for the things that we've said, especially if it is the nonverbal cues that you see when we're talking to another face-to-face. More and more, we just preface everything that this is just my opinion. Well, it's your opinion, but is your opinion really helping? Have you thought about your opinion? And will you take responsibility for your opinion in the future? Then for the last point, the time and collaborative rules, I think this is something that we often forget. What can we do? And how do we do it? Face-to-face, side-by-side, back-to-back. It's a very helpful, if not methodology, but a framework of how to think with how we deal with people. And somehow this is a very simplistic step to understanding how we work with each other, but also a very important one. Especially if what we want is really discussion and critical collaboration towards nation building and towards better understanding not just of the national issues, but also more importantly of the nuances of our faiths. And not just with the differing faiths, but most importantly, within the same traditions, like for example, Christians and Catholics. So that's all, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Espino. Father Felix, your thoughts?
Can I ask the technicians in the background to again switch to my computer so that what I have here on the screen will also be visible to you? So far it is not much. We are listening to lots of witnesses, experiences, pain, visions, and it's important that we have this space of listening. I should not analyze, categorize, not even answer all the questions uttered. I should rather try to help you to listen more deeply, help us to understand more profoundly what is going on. And for that, I, rather than give a theory, would like to tell you two little stories and then show you another slide. Maybe you have heard the name of the German sociologist, philosopher Jürgen Habermas, who was always considered as a great critic of religion. The Jesuit faculty of philosophy in Munich some years ago invited him for a discussion. And during that discussion, he, sensing that he was talking to thinking people, sensing that he was talking also to believing people, spontaneously came up with a formula which might be helpful here. Later, when the transcript of what had happened was published as a book, that formula of Habermas even became the title of the book. He said, stumbling over his own so far unbelief or incapacity to believe, maybe religion is the awareness of what is missing. Important that people are bringing in aspects they felt were missing, experience that not all of us can see, and even remind us of the fact that people who should actually be around this table or in the seats here are not here. So the question is really, can we have a dialogue with those who, according to our perception, do not want a dialogue? That brings me briefly to my second story. The theological faculty of the Muslims in the Turkish capital in the 1990s wrote a letter to the Pope, John Paul II at the time, and said, Pope, you constantly speak about inter-religious dialogue. We want this dialogue. Send us interlocutors. We want to speak with them. It is not always the Christians who have that sense what is missing. That curiosity that was also part of the cultures of the indigenous people here, who were these great navigators, always trying to explore what is beyond. They are caught up in good thinking, a lot of time to transmit our religions. Part of it is ignorance about as a story of grace into which Catholicity, discovering that, is important, and teaching that to the young is part of the task we have responsible for our future. When now we are in a moment of transition also in this Pakighinabi, you in the large circle will also ask questions, give your views, contributions and experience. I would like to share with you the 2 points that we, preparing this, were focusing about, and maybe these 2 fields can inspire your own way of presenting your vision, your feeling, your experience. Maybe you have something else you would like to mention, but let me at least show you these 2 talking points. What do you think are the root causes for radicalization, tribalism, and group hatred? And how must religious education change so that conflicts within my own religion end? Now, don't tell me we have to teach people that they shouldn't behave like that. Do you know how little it helps if you simply talk at people? Rather, ask yourself which reasons, motivations, examples, which spaces for healing experience can we open up and provide?
With those questions, I invite our participants in the outer circle. There are 3 people who have already raised their hands earlier, so may I begin with the esteemed gentleman at the back of Father Tabora, and then Dato Mus, and the gentleman at the back. Then we go from there.
Hello. Thank you very much, Attorney, for recognizing me. Actually, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, Father Tabora and the others. I have to manifest, Attorney, the things I was invited for as reactors. So I have to give my efforts to be recognized so that I can manifest what is pledged for. The thing that first I have to thank the Secretariat and the planner for being invited, Father, for this very significant occasion. Then I saw significance of these things, Father. Actually, intra-faith or interfaith is not new to each and every one of us. It was done maybe even centuries long ago. But the merit and how deep was the effect of it is not being measured. Groups and the efforts to attain a level of interfaith and intrafaith learned, and this is we're discussing Father Kerr, especially giving us 10 theses, even today's norms of the society, that if you follow me on that there, because I did not even hear anyone from the speaker produce some level of conflict. But I have to thank also because everything in this world was created out of conflict, cannot be removed within us. So I have to further my statement on that level. Seemingly, by speaking of interest, there are much on it. Maybe also for the Muslim one or in Islam, it can be founded also in some of their principles, as you have mentioned also, about identity. Identity is very significant, but there are one, speaking of that identity which can be classified as a status. Whereas when you it has something of that. A descriptive one, I have seen that on that. How do we measure as a person? Without further or deep understanding of your own, it means you have a problem on describing what relationship you have to yourself, to others, and to other things. Which can be, these two things can be a way for you to express the kind of your life in this world. I mean, you can describe the characteristic, the behavior you have in this world when you have understand fully, deeply, the real identity that you possess at a time, at a moment, or in all time, or in what matter, in what place, where it can describe the relationship you have. What I mean there is that very significant for us to really understand your identity values, your relationship values, and the way you express your life in this world, in the surface of the earth. So that can be attained by means of dialogue, conferences, the one you initiated as of today. So we support you for that matter, Father. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Datu Mus Nidasan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Hi, Father Felix, Father Joel. First of all, I would like to thank all our partners who accepted our invitation to join us in this activity, in this Pakighinabi. I only have 3 points. I would start with the thesis on traditions. While listening to Father Felix, I asked myself, how do we define then Filipino Muslimness or a Bangsamoro Muslimness? How do you define your Muslim identity? You said a while ago that identity cannot be defined merely by words, but it should be experienced. And therefore, it's very important to have traditions, religious traditions, that somehow helps us connect our physical state to our spiritual being. And because of that, it also reminded me of my unfinished work, and Brother Carl is here, in anthropology. I focus my study in Islamic anthropology, or anthropology of Islam, particularly on the Panditas. Panditas are our learned ones in Islam, and they are actually attached to Islamic traditions, but unfortunately some of the Wahhabi and purist Islam are trying to stop us from mingling or even supporting or even having our connections with the Pandita. And therefore, how do we then define being a Muslim in terms of, in case of the women? Is it by wearing a niqab, or is it being a Saudian when you wear a niqab, or wearing a shadri or a burqa, which is definitely not from here? So the Panditas help us in so many ways. Kapag Islam, I think some of the Magindanaons here or some of the Moros here knows what's the meaning of Kapag Islam. Kabanggunting. These are rituals that's attached to our identity and attached to Islam. And it's not something that we invented. It's something that our ancestors handed down to us. And it's really a combination of being a Magindanaon, being an Iranon, being a Sulug, or even a Sangir, I guess. We have those practices. So my question is, how do we preserve it? But how do you preserve a living tradition? What do we do about it? Second point is, it goes with the identity, because traditions somehow helps us identify ourselves, help us experience our identity. Now, unfortunately, the ISIS, the Iraq-Syria Islamic State, and all the violent extremists, they created an identity of Muslim that is definitely a virtual identity. It's contrary to the very Islamic teachings. It tells us to follow a caliph who is who does not have a religious basis to follow. But this is very attracting to the youth because, as you said, it's because of their ignorance, because of their impatience. The millennials, as you said, Samahan officer is here. And somehow, most of our youth also are becoming Google shake. They try to learn Islam not to the traditions that's handed down to us, but by Googling. And then they will hear Naik, this guy, or Bilal Phillips, or Mufti Menk, and describing what is being a Muslim in their own perspective, but not by the perspective of being a Magindanaon, an Iranon, or even a Filipino. And lastly, my third point, you ask about radicalism, violent extremism. And I think based on our work in Al-Qalam, somehow there are three things. Our youth today are in need of identity. If they cannot find themselves to be part of the Philippine Republic, to be a Filipino, then we will have a big problem. Because there's a African proverb that says, if you do not initiate your youth in the tribe, then they will burn down the village just to feel their heat. So that's what happened in Marawi. Very young individuals burning down the city, trying to establish an Islamic state. Second is these youth now are trying to find their belongingness. And because of this historical injustice, because of these grievances being used by the violent extremists, these are drivers that makes our youth attracted to these violent extremist ideologies. And lastly, it's the sense of purpose. The September 2 bombing here in Davao, a few days from now, we are remembering it. These youth who were responsible are not poor. They have a very good car. They have access to universities. They belong to a political family. But then, the question is, yung question ni Lunar, bakit sila ganun? Well, people, they want to find purpose. They want to find meaning. And for them, the Philippine now, if you try to look at it sa eyes nila, para siyang Star Wars. Sa Star Wars, merong Republic. Kalaban nila yon. And then, for them, the Jedis are the Maute, Bin Laden. These are the Jedis that they idolize. So, it pains us every day, hearing this. And I don't know how intra-faith, those people we invited here, can work together. I don't know after this event, what do we do next? How do we address this cancer within the Islamic community that somehow destroys us, and not only us, but even our brothers and sisters who are non-Muslims. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Datu Mus. Just a time check, it's already 5:17. This activity is supposed to last until 5 p.m. and there are still others who wish to share their thoughts. So may I ask for permission from our university president? Are we allowed extra time to continue the conversation? Look at my smile.
What does the group say? Yes? So we'll go until 6 o'clock.
Okay, Father.
Okay.
But just a reminder to our participants in the outside circle, we should be also generous enough to allow as many people to participate as we can. Let's be considerate of one another. Okay. Time limit to sabi ni Dr. Limba. But yes, sir, the gentleman at the back, please identify yourself first before sharing your thoughts and insights.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salatu wa salamu ala sayyidi istafa. Wa ba'd, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning for tomorrow. Good afternoon this day. And of course, I am Ismail Usop Sema, representing the Datu Ibrahim Paglas Memorial College at Datu Paglas, Maguindanao, under the Office of the Student Affairs. Kasama ko po ang aking administration. So, thank you for inviting us, Sir Father, in this momentous event. My insight here is about the discrimination of religion, prejudice, and biases, especially the Islam religion. There are three things. One is, now Israel has been continuously killing thousands of Muslim Palestinians. Burma has been continuously also killing the Rohingya Muslims. Why they are not being tagged as terrorists? That is one. Why they are not being tagged as a terrorist by the United Nations? It is discrimination. Is a discrimination to innocent Muslim victims. Why Muslim is a suspect? The media and the government tag him immediately terrorist. When Muslim kill one people, immediately the media and the government tag him as a terrorist. Then, is it a media anonymously campaign to destroy the image of religion Islam as a whole, or the Muslim? Number three, recently a suspect of the Manila Resort World killed more than 30 people. Why media and government did not tag him as a Christian terrorist? Lastly, sir, Father, my question is, how to solve this discrimination, biases, prejudice against Muslim and Islamic religion as a whole? Thank you po.
Thank you. We shall hear from other participants. Yes, sir. And then one from this side. And then probably the man in green. Oh, Dr. Limba is also suggesting if we can hear also from our women participants.
Am I recognized, ma'am?
Yes, yes, you are recognized.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good afternoon to everybody. I am Dr. Nolan Bisapal, a member of the Bangsamoro, Sharia Law League of the Philippines, based in Cotabato City. Now, I just would like to say that the 10 theses of Father Kenneth, Father Felix Corner is very, very nice to my mind because it states many things. However, I just want to make some comments on one of its line, specifically on number 10, on the Islam's own resources, particularly on paragraph number 1, which, if you allow me to read, Father, which says that the Quran's fundamental intention is to call everyone to conversion to the one and only God. And I think that is the Almighty Allah. Well, at this point, I beg to disagree on this. And my comment is that conversion is not the real and primary purpose of the Holy Quran. Because as far as I know, and knowledge in Quran as a Sharia lawyer, the intention there is for the believers, for the Muslims, to believe in the oneness of God, and that is Allah. To pray for Him as a true believer in Islam. I think that is the basic and fundamental text of the Quran. For the Muslim to read the Quran, understand the Quran, and bring it to action, so that peace may be attained by the Muslim Ummah or community. That is the way I understand on this. So on this time, this is my comment, whether I'm only ulama here, but that is my point there. Because in Islam, if you are a perfect believer in Islam, you should abide with the 5 pillars of Islam. I'd like to mention at this point in time, the one is believed in the one of God, and that is Allah, that you have to pray 5 times a day, pilgrimage to Mecca, give zakats, alms, and during month of Ramadan, you have to, what you call the fasting. Fasting, you have to fast. So with that, that is my comment, Father. Thank you very much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, sir. Yes. Please identify yourself and then share your thoughts.
Okay, A'udhu billahi minasyaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Kaharudin G. Dalaten from the Office of the Governor, Sarangani Province. So, these are my, what should I call this? Sentiments on the present situation of Mindanao problem or conflict. So, what I am trying to convey this Pakighinabi is that this issue on the refute among Muslim youth, because this is really an issue in happening in our area, where this is not only about religious refutes, but also on the political refutes, as what Sir Mo said, that there are many problems that the Muslim youth are encountering today. First thing that I would like to take this point is this refute on religion, which leads to radicalization or to extremism among youth. So we can see right now in Marawi that most of the frontliners of the ISIS or this Mauti group are the youth. We can see right now in the social media, young people age 10 carrying guns, IEDs on their jackets. So it is really alarming for us seeing our fellow young people carrying this kind of explosive devices. So it hurts us. Then that's a very sad thing. And then next, this refute on the political biases. So we have this MILF, MNLF issues. So the MILF youth will go this way, the MNLF will go this way. So it is really a sad thing that our young people is engaged with this. So on the context of the religious aspect, what we would like to convey to our leaders who are here today is that come up with a consensus on what kind of future would you want us to have. Because we are casualty. The young people are the number one casualty. We would like to. The other one came from Syria. This is what proper teaching for us, Moro youth, in following which school of thought to be follow, what madhab we should do, what interpretation of the sunnah of the Prophet we should do, because we have no uniformity. Sometimes I am asking myself, is this all about this religious orientation outside the country that brings us more confusions with these problems? Somehow, I am asking myself that, or it is the thing that we have no good governance that would solve this problem. Because it is, on my point of view, that we have these community situations that we are encountering, but still the political people doesn't see this. Like one of the political official in Marawi said that there are problems in our madari system, in our madrasa. That's why the proliferation of these ISIS is very rampant today. So on their part, they have intel funds, they have everything to control the situation. And see, the product of poor governance happened in Marawi. These radical people entered without their efforts, without their initiatives. So I am asking everyone that including the stakeholders, the non-Muslim stakeholders, that please help us to realize this good governance that we want, to control the situation, to have a good life, a better system that would serve us in good ways and more beneficial ways. Because it is really alarming that if we don't have this BBL, Bangsamoro Basic Law, what will happen next? The lost command of MILF will become another part of the ISIS and other terror groups. Imagine. So this is not only about religious, but it really makes sense on the political side of what is happening. Because I do believe that the political system or the governance can do to control the situation. So that's my point, and I think I gave you a good situation on what we can do in the future with this dialogue. So thank you and wassalam.
Thank you, sir. At the suggestion of Dr. Limba, can we now hear from a female participant in the bigger circle? The one at the back, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Althea Danya Esmael, Project Coordinator for Salam Movement in Ateneo de Davao University. So I'd just like to share some insights after hearing all the brilliant ideas and sharings and learnings from all of us here in this room. So thank you for Father Corner for joining us in our Pakighinabi session today. So let me start with the idea of pointing out that moral weakness, or should I say moral failure, underlies much of the misery on this earth. Let me tell you a story about Iblis, or famously known as Satan. Iblis, in the Quran, was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bow down to Adam, alayhi salam. The angels bowed down to Adam, alayhi salam. And then Iblis, or Satan, refused to bow. Why? Because he said that, why should I bow to him? I was made from fire and he was made from clay. And then, here we are, we ask ourselves, which really is higher, fire or clay? Anong mas mataas pala? Yung fire or yung clay? Sinong mas magaling? Yung fire or clay? So in that sense, in that idea, we can learn that Iblis or Satan fell into the sin of arrogance, and that is the root of satanic logic. He fell into the sin of arrogance. Why? Because he invented for himself his own hierarchy of being higher, because he was made from fire according to him, and Adam alayhi salam was only made from clay. So in that sense, we can learn, and in that story, we can learn from the Quran that the moment we start to erect in our minds that and laws, hierarchies in which we put ourselves higher than the other or better than the other, then we fall to the sin of arrogance. Stated differently, in Islamic perspective, the sin of arrogance fall into shirk. Because we put our own will above Allah's will, and that is the supreme will, the will of God. So false hierarchies, therefore, I'm not saying that all hierarchies are bad, but false hierarchies sow division, discord, and violence. So if we, as human beings, when we start to see the other person as inferior to us, when we start to tell ourselves that I'm a Muslim, I'm better than him, because he's non-Muslim, then we become extremists. And in Islam, there is no such thing as extreme. In Islam, we are moderate in Islam. So I just want to share that idea and to accept for us people, to accept the other as the other without provision, without reasons, without requirements. For me, that is the true essence of democracy. Of us human beings being equal, created as equals. We do not accept the other person just because gusto natin siya, just because he is rich, just because he is not poor, so we accept him. So I think that's all I just want to share, because we engage into a dialogue. And I think it's very important that when we start to tell ourselves that I want to engage in a dialogue, you remove the notion of you are better than the other. So that's all. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Ms. Althea. Yes, man in green. Please identify yourself and then share your thoughts.
I'm Father Hill Donaire. I'm a Jesuit. Assalamualaikum. Just 3 points I'd like to share. First one, this is for the young, but the young are already going out. I remember when I was a student, I would be asked by my teachers to join in some dialogue, some conference. And the start, I felt like I was lost. I don't know what they're talking about. Siguro, I just want to share inter and intra. It hasn't been defined clearly, but maybe some of you already have a clear idea of what intra and inter is. Inter-dialogue would mean interfaith. That would mean dialogue between Christians and Muslims. Intra would be inside the faith. Like, for example, if I'm a Protestant and a Catholic and we're engaged in dialogue, that is intra-faith dialogue. If I'm a Muslim, I would be engaged in intra-faith dialogue. If I'm let's say I'm a Sunni and I'm engaged with a Shia, that's intra-faith dialogue. Or we can maybe expand it to if I'm a Maranao and I'm engaging in a discussion with a Tausugar Iranon, it's within that faith. That's called intra-faith dialogue, just for the young, especially the young, who I was feeling, when I was young, I felt I was lost in the discussion because they're just terms that were not defined clearly at the start. Okay, so that's the first point. The second is this, and I think this is for also, I'm speaking from my Christian perspective. Before I studied Islam, I always thought of the Muslims as just one homogeneous group, and I think it's clear, especially for the Christians here now, that that is not the case. When we speak of our brothers and sisters who are Muslims, they're not one homogeneous group. You may have sensed already the division between the Sunni and the Shia, but I think if you're going to talk about the Philippine situation, that is multiplied maybe 17, 18 times because of the tribes that we have. What I'd like to share is that the problem that we have here in our country is when you speak of the Muslims, and that's what the government has acknowledged, that we want to help our Muslim brothers and sisters, but then I think they always refer to the Muslim as one homogeneous group, and I think that is one big problem, because amongst the Muslim brothers and sisters of ours, there's no one single unity that is happening, and that is what we desire to have, because if we will be working with our Muslim brothers and sisters, and if we don't sense a one united group, then we'll just be dealing with one group which might be opposed by other groups, and which will lead to many other problems. Third point that I'd like to share is like a dream, and I think this is the start of the dream that we have. We want to see a Mindanao that is progressive, and part of that would be the unity, or at least what Father Felix have mentioned, the desire for unity in the, not really unity in uniformity. How do you say it, Father Felix? It's like, I'm going to share to you my experience with Indonesia. In Indonesia, they have this very strong, moderate Islam that is very, very helpful in tempering the radicalist movement in Indonesia. Of course, there's still bombings in Indonesia, but the strong, moderate group in Indonesia is very, very instrumental. And that is my dream that will also happen among our Muslim brothers and sisters in this country. That there will be one united stand amongst our Muslim brothers and sisters. Because if that will not emerge, then other groups, the extremists, most probably would overcome us. So there is really a need for us, especially here in this group, to be united in the sense of coming up, what is the identity of the Filipino Muslim? I'd like to highlight what our brother Mus has mentioned at the start. We have to define that, because if there is no such thing as an identity of a Muslim Filipino, then we would always be engaged in quarrels, and we wouldn't be able to achieve what we desire. Progressive Mindanao will always depend on that. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you. Father Hill. Yes, sir.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. I am Nor Amin Kaludrag from Adat Putad, Cotabato City. I would like to focus my statement on the questions earlier you showed in the monitor. Okay. So I think the root cause of radicalism or everything in other terms is education for me. Because say for example, magtatagalog na lang ako. Say for example po ang issue ng land grabbing sa Mindanao area or sa Maguindanao, Maguindanao. Isang area po sa Buldon area, ang nagmamayari is Christian, where in fact it was territory of a Iranian community. So that's one of the reason na dahil because of lack of education, nagkakaroon ng mas marami pang problema. And susunod na dito yung poverty and so on. So I think religious can be used as a spear to create or build a unity in the community. But sometimes religious belief can also use as a spear to create a conflict on the ground. Say for example, itong mga ISIS na to, ISIS was recruiting minors that don't have enough education. And they are putting it a wrong explanation or interpretation on this. So that's the reason why the challenge here to our community or to our millennials is to educate ourselves properly, not on the internet, not on the Facebook, na hindi nakikita natin what is the definition of terrorism, but educate ourselves personally. We believe also, I think religion is Christian. And there is a life after this. And educating ourselves on religion is one of the tools that we can use after life.
For student at the back and one more.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Subhanaka la ilma illa barakatuhu. First of all, media itself can be biased. Whether you are right or wrong, and the reality is being hidden because of that. And I want to give my point of view of questioning yourself about this. What is the essence of the religion if the word itself is not unity? And what is the essence of the religion if we don't respect? Can we call that religion itself? But if we need to find a solution first to ourselves and the context of our life, it is because this is the only thing that we can find our solution. We, as a youth, must have our own freedom. It is not because of the elders must find our solution. I come up with the ideas of searching of the intra. I for identity, N for nature, T for tolerate, R for respect, A for action. Identity. Identity of each of one of us will know and understand. So it radically means that we must respect each other. It is not only for our religion. Religion is their own self, but our own. Nature itself, even if the IC youth is uneducated. The only thing that we can find in this situation is the knowledge. Because even the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "Talibul ilm faridatu ala kulli muslimun." Searching of knowledge is obligatory for us Muslim and Muslimatun. Whereas, why it is not come up with the ideas of understanding the society and the problem itself. It is not because of the politics. It is not because of the society. It is not because of the money and the power. It is because of our own self and the identity. We don't respect each other for the pride we have. We do want what we need, but we don't have a sympathy with the other that below in us. So that's the problem of the society. We can come up with the ideas how to deal with our own self, that interrogation ourselves. And that's what's happening to the leaders right nowadays. They don't understand the meaning of life. The youth itself is the key, but the elders itself is the reality, where we can search the truth and the solution. But how can we understand the thing that is hidden from the letter or words if we don't really respect each other? Religion is not there for us to find a solution, our own self. Religion is there for us as a guidelines. That's the reality. We don't base on such any philosophy. We don't base on such in science. We base on the religion itself because that's the guidelines. That is sent from the God, a scripture from the God. It is not a joke for us to learn for anyone because we base on the religion. And lastly, religion itself is very important because it is define our identity and beliefs. Why? Because of the religion, we do respect each other. Because of the religion, we love each other. But I want to answer the question, how can we solve the problem itself by the discrimination itself? Simply, respect. The difference between the other religion in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, la farqa bayna al-muslim wal-kuffar illa bi salah. It means that the difference between the Muslim and the non-Muslim is salah. So it means that we are probably the same, but we don't respect each other in that case. We don't know the reality of the world itself. We want to achieve more than things that we ever thought. We can be a professional, we can be rich, but we don't know each other. We rely on ourselves. We don't love each other. We don't respect each other. We come up with the ideas of the philosophy and the science, but we don't know what is the real meaning of it. We don't believe in the religion. We don't believe in the good virtue. We don't believe in something else, but we only need ourselves because of the pride. Because of the pride itself. That's why even the leaders must show us what would be the best thing to do. But because of the pride, that's not really matter. As a youth itself, we need you as the elders to help us to find the unity itself. Because the youth itself, is the future. And we need you to understand what is the present nowadays, even the past. Subhanallah, this is not a thing that we can be so proclaimed to ourselves. We must have a unity, respect, interrogation, love. Subhanallah, this is not a thing that we can't imagine. Peace is possible because the Prophet Muhammad said, "La yu'minu ahadukum hatta yuhibbu ma yuhibbu li nafsi." Hindi kompleto ang paniniwala ng isa sa hindi nyo mahalin ang kapwa-kapatid. Malalaman natin doon na hindi lang dapat hindi yung minumungkahin natin isang sa loobin natin, ngunit hindi na. That's my point. Inshallah, we can understand it is the isolation of identity. Shukran.
Final remarks of our discussant before we end our Pakishan. They extend to share their conversation online. I'm sure it's still ongoing. Use the hashtag Pakighinabi. Again, my apologies. Let's hear from our lead discussant before we wrap up this Pakighinabi.
Maybe you can again use the projector towards what I have on the screen here, so you can see that. Thank you very much for all the good remarks that were made. Maybe one way of continuing what has been shared today can be to look at those reflection points and share with your fellow human beings, your fellow believers, on the following themes. When did I feel that the other is not our enemy, but a fellow believer, even if he belongs to a different way of seeing my faith tradition? Which responsibility do we have as one religion in our region, our country, our world today? And can I already feel that members of other religions have suffered from what we have done to them? Sense, open our hearts of God's peace and love. I think that is the intention by which we were created and called. We have heard so many and synthesized, uttered of new hope. Very much.
Brother Kerner. As of our appreciation for gracing this event, we would like to give Doctor, because he holds a double doctorium at Ateneo de Davao University, Davao City, Felices University. Insightful, share more. Please discussion on the online platform. Use the handle at the register outside. And a pleasant evening to you all.